My name is Nadia Osei Mensah. I am 29 years old. Last Tuesday, I sat in my car in the parking garage of the Hargrove Convention Center on Delancey Boulevard and listened to 11 voicemails in a row. Not one of them was from my brother. Every single one was from my mother, my father, my aunt, two cousins I hadn't spoken to in over 2 years, and a woman named Patricia Osei Mensah, my mother's older sister, who had never in my entire life called me first. They all said different things, but they were all asking for the same thing, and not one of them said the words I had been waiting to hear since the 14th of May, 2 years and 7 months ago, the day my family drove 4 hours past my university to attend a birthday party for my brother, instead of watching me walk across a stage and collect the degree that had cost me $63, 0 and 4 years of my life. Before I tell you what they were asking for, let me start from the beginning. Before I get into what happened next, please take a second to like and subscribe, but only if this story actually means something to you. Drop your city or just 2 words in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from tonight. Let me take you back to autumn of 2014. Pembroke Falls, Ohio. Population 6,200. Population 6. The high school football coach gets his name on a road before any teacher does. I was 17. My brother, Kofi Osei Mensah, was 22. Kofi was the kind of person a room reorganizes itself around. Not because he demanded it, because my parents arranged it that way for so long that everyone had simply learned where to stand. He had dropped out of Whitmore Community College after 1 semester, taken a job at a tile and flooring warehouse on Route 9, and was, according to my father, Emmanuel Osei Mensah, figuring things out. He had been figuring things out for 3 years. No one used that phrase about me, not once. That Thanksgiving, the house on Carver Street smelled like palm nut soup and candle wax. My mother, Abena Osei Mensah, had cooked for 2 days straight. She does that when she wants, to demonstrate love without saying anything. I sat at the far end of the table. Kofi sat beside my father, the way he always did, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. My Aunt Patricia drove up from Columbus. My mother's friend Dorinda Clark was there with her husband, whose name I never learned, and my cousin Marcus sat beside me, eating quickly, saying nothing. That night, I announced I had applied to 4 universities. I had done it alone, filled out the FAFSA alone, written the personal statement alone in the school library on Tuesday and Thursday evenings while my mother took Kofi to a job interview at a tile company 2 towns over. I told them I applied to Ridgewood State, Carver University, Holmley College, and Brenton University. My father looked up from his plate. "Who told you to do that?" he said, not harshly, calmly, like I had signed a lease on a building he owned without asking. "I researched it myself," I said. My mother said nothing. She passed the bread. Patricia said, "Smart girl." Marcus kept eating. That was the whole conversation. 37 seconds. I counted later. The inciting wound was not what my father said. It was the silence that came after it. Marcus, Patricia, Dorinda and her husband, whose name I never learned. Not one of them said she applied to 4 universities by herself. Not one of them said that takes something. They all just kept eating, and the soup smelled like cardamom and palm oil, and I understood something that night that I had been half understanding for years. That there was a table, and I was near it. But I was not at it. Just let that sit. 4 years later, I graduated from Brenton University in Fairfield, Ohio, with a Bachelor of Science in Accounting, a 3.71 GPA, a job offer already signed. Caldwell, Teachate, Merritt, Financial Services, Columbus. Starting salary, $52,000. My graduation was on May 14, 2021, at 10 a.m., the Brenton University Convocation Hall, capacity 2,800. I had given my parents the date 11 months in advance. I emailed it, I texted it, I wrote it on a card and mailed it to the house on Carver Street in an envelope I addressed in my best handwriting. In March, Kofi got a promotion at the tile warehouse, assistant manager. My mother called me to tell me. She was crying, the good kind, the kind she never cried on the phone to me. In April, my father mentioned casually that Kofi's birthday fell on May 16th. "I know," I said. "He wants a party this year, big one." "Okay," I said, "my graduation is the 14th. "Of course," my father said, "of course." Pause. I know now what that pause meant. I did not know then, or maybe I did and simply refused to name it. May 14th came. I dressed in my gown at 7:43 a.m. in a dormitory room that smelled of dry erase marker and cheap floor cleaner. I did not eat breakfast. I sat on the edge of my bed and called my mother. No answer. I called my father. No answer. I walked across the stage at 10:22 a.m. A faculty administrator named Dr. Yolanda Tift handed me my diploma folder and shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, Miss Osei Mensah." It was the first time anyone had said my full name that morning. I had one guest in the audience, my roommate, Shayla Dawson, who had already graduated the previous December and drove back from Cleveland specifically to sit in that hall and clap for me. After the ceremony, standing outside Convocation Hall in the gray mid-morning light, I called my father again. This time he answered, "We're at Kofi's," he said. Not sorry, not we couldn't make it, just we're at Kofi's, like that was information. Like it answered a question no one had asked. I said, "Today was my graduation." He said, "We know, Nadia. We'll celebrate when you're home." I said, "Okay." I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. We never celebrated. I came home for one weekend in June. My mother made jollof rice, which she makes for everything, grief, joy, Tuesday. My father said, "Good work," and went back to the television. There was no cake, no photo taken, no mention of Caldwell as Merritt. My brother showed me a video on his phone of his birthday party. Rented hall, balloon arch, a 3-tier cake from the Flemington Bakery on Sycamore. I watched the whole video. I said, "Looks like it was a good time." That Sunday evening, I packed my suitcase, the small navy blue one with the broken zipper I'd been meaning to fix for 2 years, and I drove back to Columbus. I did not cry until I was past the Pembroke Falls city limits sign on Route 11. Then I cried for about 6 miles. Then I stopped. Then I kept driving. I want to be precise about this because people often romanticize this part. When I arrived in Columbus in June 2021 to start at Caldwell TUN Merritt, I had $140 in a checking account, $63,000 in student debt, no credit card, and a sublet in a 3-bedroom apartment on Fenwick Lane with 2 strangers, a nursing student named Greta Holst and a delivery driver named Tim, whose last name I never asked. My bedroom had a mattress on the floor and a window that faced a parking lot. I made $52,000 a year, which came to $3,190 a month after taxes. My sublet cost $640. My student loan minimum was $312. I ate rice and canned tomatoes 3 nights a week. I bought my work clothes from the Goodwill on Broad Street. 2 blazers, 4 blouses, a pair of black trousers that fit almost perfectly. I went to work. I came home. I did not call Pembroke Falls. They called me twice in those first 2 months. My mother once, asking if I had settled. My father once, asking if I knew that Kofi was thinking about taking a business course at the community college. I answered both calls. I spoke for less than 4 minutes each time. I said, "Yes, I've settled." I said, "That's great for Kofi." Then I said I had to go. I'll tell you what no contact costs because I think people assume it's peaceful. It is not peaceful. It costs you the emergency contact line. Every form, doctor's office, apartment lease, HR intake has a box. I wrote Shayla Dawson in that box for 2 years because she was the only person I was certain would answer. It costs you birthdays. Not the receiving of a call. I had made my peace with that. It costs you the reflex. The way your hand moves toward your phone on a birthday morning before your brain catches up. The split second before you remember. It costs you the correction. Somewhere in Pembroke Falls, my mother was telling a version of my life to Dorinda Clark and Patricia and whoever sat at that table now. I could not hear what she was saying. I could not correct it. I could only exist in the corrected version of myself and hope that the truth would eventually be louder. And it cost me this. For the first 14 months, every morning I woke up, there was a moment, 4 or 5 seconds maybe, where I heard my father's voice. Not anything specific, just the tone. The one that meant your presence is a disruption. But here is what silence gave me. One morning in September 2022, a Tuesday, 6:17 a.m., the parking lot outside my window still gray and wet from overnight rain. I woke up and there was nothing. No voice, no tone, just the hum of the mini fridge and Greta moving around in the kitchen and the specific smell of ground coffee and a new morning. I lay there for a while. I thought, oh, this is what it feels like when a sound you've lived with for so long finally stops. It felt like the first day after a long fever breaks. Quiet, a little disoriented, and then careful, early, uncertain. Like something was beginning. If you're still here, hit that subscribe button, because this story is about to get a lot more complicated. There was no montage. Just alarm clocks and spreadsheets and falling asleep with a tax code manual open on my chest. 2021, I started at Caldwell TUN Merritt as a junior financial analyst. My desk was between the copier and the window that faced the parking garage. I brought my own lunch every day. I double-checked everything I submitted, every figure, every decimal, every footnote. My manager, a quiet, deliberate man named Franklin Okafor, noticed. "You check things twice," he said one afternoon, looking at a reconciliation I'd flagged before it became a problem. "I always have," I said. "Good," he said, and went back to his desk. Franklin Okafor is 61 years old. He grew up in Akron. He came to this country with his parents at 8 years old and put himself through night school while working in a warehouse. Not a tile warehouse, but I noticed the parallel and kept it to myself. He does not say much. When he does, it is worth writing down. In my second month, he told me something I have returned to regularly. We were reviewing a client audit that had gone sideways because someone in the chain had assumed rather than verified. He looked at me over the rim of his reading glasses and said, "The people who grew up having to verify everything for themselves, they are the ones who catch the things everyone else misses." He was not talking about me specifically, but he was not talking about me. I took the CPA exam in February of 2022 and passed all 4 sections on the first attempt. I did not tell my family. I told Shayla Dawson, who drove to Columbus that weekend and brought a bottle of Prosecco and 2 mismatched glasses, and we sat on my mattress. By then, I had a bed frame, a $90 one from a furniture warehouse on Hamilton, and we drank to it. She had her own version of exile. Her mother had remarried and moved to Portland without mentioning it until 2 weeks before. Her stepfather had a son who got the guest room, and Shayla had gotten a phone call. We didn't talk about it often. But the night we drank to my CPA, we sat there in the kind of quiet that only exists between 2 people who understand, without explanation, the specific shape of being made to feel incidental. We didn't need to name it. It sat in the room with us like something understood. By the end of 2022, I was a senior analyst. By mid-2023, Franklin had recommended me for a team lead position on the firm's mid-market corporate accounts. I was 26 years old. I had a real bed, a kitchen with food in it, a savings account with $8,400 in it. The first time in my life, I had money that had no immediate destination, and I had the box. I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. When I left home for university in 2017, I took one thing from the house on Carver Street that didn't belong to me. Not stolen. Borrowed, in the way that you borrow something from a childhood you are quietly leaving behind. It was a small wooden box, cedar, about the size of a hardcover book, with a brass clasp, that had lived on the shelf above the fireplace my entire life. Inside it, my mother kept photographs. Not the framed ones, the unsorted ones, the ones no one had gotten around to displaying. I took it because my own photos were in there. Birthday mornings, school plays, a photograph of me at age 6 sitting in my grandmother's lap in Accra, grinning so wide my eyes are nearly shut. I had carried that box through 2 dorms, 3 apartments, and 4 years without opening it. In November of 2023, I opened it. It took me about an hour to go through everything. Some of it I had expected, the school photos, the birthday mornings, but at the bottom, under everything else, there were 3 photographs I had never seen. One was of me at roughly 18 months old, asleep in my father's arms. He is looking down at me with an expression I do not have another word for except unguarded. It is the only photograph I have ever seen of my father where he does not know he is being looked at. One was my mother and me at what appears to be a church picnic, maybe 2003. She is braiding my hair, her hands are in my hair, and she is laughing at something off camera. And the third was a photograph of all 4 of us. Me, Kofi, my mother, my father, standing in front of the house on Carver Street. Kofi is maybe 12, which makes me 7. My father's hand is on Kofi's shoulder. My mother's hand is on my shoulder. We are all looking at the camera. We look like a family. I sat with those 3 photographs for a long time. I did not feel what I thought I would feel. I had expected anger or grief or some clean thing I could name. What I felt instead was more complicated and more true. I felt the weight of what could have been a different story. I felt the specific, quiet sadness of looking at a photograph of people who loved you in ways they did not know how to keep consistent. I put the photographs back in the box. I closed the brass clasp. I got up and made coffee and went to work. I'll tell you now so you understand the full picture. I did not engineer what happened next. I did not post about my career online. I did not send updates to family. I did nothing except continue to do my work. In January 2024, Caldwell T.G. Merritt was cited in a feature article in the Columbus Business Digest, a profile of the firm's expansion into a new mid-market division. The article named the team lead on the initiative. My name, my full name, Nadia Osei Mensah. I found out about this because Franklin forwarded it to me with a 2-word email that said, well deserved. I don't know exactly how my family found it. My best guess is Patricia Osei Mensah, who has, at various points in her life, Googled every member of her family with the thoroughness of a government contractor. My second guess is Dorinda Clark's husband, whose name I eventually learned was Gerald, and who apparently spent his evenings on LinkedIn. Either way, February 7th, 2024, my phone began vibrating. Voicemail 1. My mother. Bright, careful voice. Nadia, it's Mama. We saw the article. We are so proud of you. Call us back. We want to hear everything. Voicemail 2. My father. His voice tighter, more formal. The voice he uses when he's performing steadiness. Nadia, your father. I think we should talk. It's been too long. Call home. Voicemail 3. Patricia. No warm-up. Nadia, this is your auntie. You know I have always said you were the sharp one. Call your mother. She misses you. Voicemail 4. My cousin Marcus, who had not spoken to me in 22 months, who I will note once again said nothing at the Thanksgiving table in 2014. Hey Nadia, it's Marcus. That article was dope. Hey, I'm actually thinking about maybe looking into some financial stuff like investments or whatever. Would you be down to talk sometime? Voicemail 5 through 7. 2 cousins I could identify by voice and one I couldn't place at all. Voicemail 8. My father again. This one's shorter. We are proud of you, Nadia. I mean that. That was the whole of 11 voicemails across 3 days. Not one of them said, I'm sorry we missed your graduation. Not one of them said, we should have been there. Not one of them said, we got it wrong. They had discovered a successful version of me, and they wanted access to it. Just let that sit. I listened to all 11. I sat in my car on Fenwick Lane with the engine off and the heat going and listened to every single one. Then I put my phone in my bag. Then I went upstairs and made dinner. In March of 2024, Caldwell T. Merritt hosted the Columbus Mid-Market Finance Summit, a 2-day industry conference at the Hargrove Convention Center on Delancey Boulevard. It was a large event. 340 registered attendees, 12 panel sessions, and a keynote luncheon on the second day. I was a panelist on day 1. I was the keynote speaker on day 2. Franklin had put my name forward. I had spent 6 weeks preparing. I had practiced the 28-minute keynote until I could feel its rhythm in my sternum. I did not invite my family. I did not tell my family. I tell you this because I want to be clear. I did not set a stage and summon them. What happened was entirely of their own construction. My mother found out through Dorinda Clark, whose husband Gerald apparently monitored the Hargrove Convention Center's public events calendar with the same diligence he applied to LinkedIn. Gerald told Dorinda. Dorinda told my mother. My mother, I learned later, told my father, and they drove from Pembroke Falls, 4 hours and 17 minutes on a Thursday morning in March, without telling me. I found this out the way I found out most things in my life. At the exact moment, it was too late to do anything about it. I was backstage at 11:47 a.m., 13 minutes before I was scheduled to walk to the podium, when a convention staff member named Brianna, small silver name badge, brisk walk, came to tell me that a woman at the front of house desk had identified herself as my mother and was asking to be seated. I absorbed this for approximately 4 seconds. Is there space? I said. Yes, she said. Seat her, I said. I did not ask who else was with her. I did not ask to speak to her. I turned back to my notes and I stood there and I breathed. And 13 minutes later, I walked onto that stage in front of 340 people and I did my job. The room was arranged in round tables of 8, a long rectangular stage at the front. I did not look for my mother until I was settled at the podium. Then I let my eyes move across the room in the way that a speaker does, not looking for individuals, taking in the whole. I found her at a table near the center right. She was seated next to my father, who was wearing the gray suit jacket he wore to Kofi's promotion dinner. Patricia was there. Marcus and Kofi. In the third row from the stage, at a table near the aisle, wearing a shirt I had never seen. My father looked up and found my face at the exact moment I looked at his. The expression that crossed his face was not pride. It was not even recognition exactly, it was recalculation. the micro adjustment of a person whose understanding of a situation has shifted and is now being quietly, rapidly revised. My mother put her hand over her mouth. I looked back at my notes. I did my 28 minutes. I talked about what it means to build trust in financial partnerships, how the numbers are rarely the problem. The problem is always the gap between what is said and what is documented. I talked about the 3 years I spent as a junior analyst learning that the best way to correct an error is to find it before anyone else does. I talked about the specific undervalued skill of checking your own assumptions before defending them. Near the end, I looked up from my notes and spoke directly to the room. The question I get asked most often, I said, is how I learned to trust my own read of a situation. My honest answer is that I grew up in an environment where I had to verify everything myself. No one handed me the framework. I built it because I had no other option. And what I know now, what I would tell anyone who came up the same way, is that being made to do something alone is not the same as being unworthy of help. It is simply the long route to the same destination. And sometimes the long route teaches you things the short route never could. 340 people applauded. I did not look at my family's table. Afterward, I stood at the front of the room for 20 minutes talking to attendees, other analysts, a few firm directors, 2 students from Brenton University who had driven down specifically because they had seen my name on the program. I saw my family approach in my peripheral vision before they reached me. My mother got to me first. She looked smaller than I remembered, which is always a surprise. She said, "Nadia." Just my name, the way you say something you haven't been allowed to say out loud. "Hi, Mama," I said. My father reached out and put his hand briefly on my forearm. He said, "We saw the article." "I know," I said. "I got the voicemails." He looked at me for a moment, a long moment for him. Patricia said, "We are all so proud of you, Nadia." "Thank you, Patricia," I said. Marcus said, "That speech was actually really—" "Marcus," I said, not unkindly. "I know." Kofi was last. He stood a little apart from the others, which was unusual for a person who had spent most of his life at the center. He looked at me and said, "You were really good up there, Nadia." "Thank you, Kofi," I said, and I meant it. He was the only one who said something true. My father cleared his throat. "We thought maybe we could all go to dinner. There's that place on—" "I have a debrief with my team until 4, I said, "and I have a dinner scheduled with a client at 6. "Tomorrow?" my mother said. "I have an early meeting," I said. "Dad, I'm glad you drove up, I really am, but I need you to understand something." I looked at him steadily. "I know you're proud now. I need that to be true when I'm not standing on a stage." He nodded. Once. He didn't say anything. I said, "I'll call you." To Patricia, "It was good to see you." To Marcus, "I'll email you some reading on index funds." To Kofi, "Tell me about the promotion next time." Then I walked back to the stage area to find Franklin and the team steady, even. That evening, at 9:14 p.m., from my hotel room on the 6th floor of the Hargrove extended stay, I sent one email to my father's address, which he shares with my mother because he has always been the official correspondent of the household. It was 11 sentences. It named, without embellishment, what had happened on May 14, 2021. It named, without embellishment, what had been absent in the years after, not from them, but from any acknowledgement of what had occurred. It said, "I do not need an apology to continue existing in your lives, but I need you to understand that the version of me you are reaching toward now was built specifically in the absence of the support you chose not to give. I will not pretend otherwise." It said, "I love you. That is not a resource I have managed to exhaust." It said, "When you're ready to talk, not to catch up, not to celebrate, but to actually talk, I'll answer." It said, "Good night." Then I turned off the lamp. I did not orchestrate what happened after. I want to be very clear about that. What I know through Shayla, who has maintained a cordial relationship with Marcus, who talks more than he realizes, and through one phone call with Kofi in May 2024, which I will get to. In the weeks following the conference, my father read the email to my mother. My mother told Patricia, and this part I believe completely because I have known Patricia since I was born, told Dorinda Clark. And Dorinda Clark, at a church coffee hour in Pembroke Falls, mentioned the email to 3 women in the congregation, including a woman named Vera Abrams, who had been present at the 2021 graduation of her own daughter and had heard peripherally that the Osei Mensah family had not attended Nadia's commencement. The story rippled outward from there. My mother, from what Shayla gathered through Marcus, stopped attending the Thursday Women's Fellowship for several weeks. Not because she was publicly shamed, nothing so dramatic, but because the community had recalibrated. The careful, unspoken understanding among people who have known a family for years, who filled in the gaps of what was not said, had shifted. The version of me my mother had been presenting to that community, the daughter who was doing well, very independent, very focused on her career, had been quietly upgraded to the daughter who gave a keynote address at the Hargrove Convention Center while her family sat in the audience she did not invite them to. There is a particular discomfort in being proud of someone in public when you know privately what it cost them to become that person without you. My mother is not a bad person. She is a person who made a set of choices that had a compounding effect, and who had been telling herself, I believe, that it hadn't. My father made one change that Kofi told me about. He took the photograph from the Pembroke Falls Gazette, the one that had accompanied a small local article on the Columbus Business Digest feature, and put it in a frame. A $10 frame, Kofi said, from Target. He put it on the shelf above the fireplace, next to the photographs of Kofi's promotion dinner. Kofi told me this on a Tuesday in May. He called me, which he had never done before, without a prompt. He said, I need to tell you something. Okay, I said. I should have called you. On graduation day, I should have called you. You were at your birthday party, I said. It was a bad birthday party, he said, which made me laugh. The first time I had laughed at something involving my family in a long time. A short laugh, the kind that costs something. I know it's not enough, he said. It's something, I said. There was a long pause. Kofi is not good with pauses. Are you going to come home, he said. I don't know yet, I said. I'll let you know. That call lasted 19 minutes. It was not a repair. But it was the first real thing anyone in my family had said to me in 3 years. I will not pretend it was nothing. In September 2024, I established a small annual scholarship through Brenton University's School of Business, awarded to one first-generation student in the accounting or finance program who demonstrated exceptional academic independence, meaning a student who had navigated the application and financial aid process largely or entirely without parental guidance. I named it the Shayla Dawson Scholarship for Independent Achievement. Shayla cried when I told her. I told her over the phone, which meant she could cry freely and I didn't have to manage my face. She said, Nadia, you can't name it after me? I said, I already filed the paperwork. She cried again. Then she said, you know I'm going to tell everyone. I said, that's why I told you. The first recipient was a 20-year-old student from Youngstown named Deja Nwosu, who had applied to Brenton, been admitted, and completed her first year entirely without the knowledge of her parents, who had told her a 4-year degree was not practical. I wrote her a letter, 1 page. I told her the degree would cost something she hadn't anticipated and give her something she couldn't yet measure. I told her to check everything twice. I told her the people who grow up verifying things for themselves are the ones who catch what everyone else misses. I did not sign it with my title. I signed it with my name. Last December, 4 days before Christmas, I had 6 people to dinner in my apartment on Fenwick Lane. I have a kitchen table now. Real wood, found at an estate sale on Avery Road for $85. Chairs that don't quite match. Shayla and her partner Jerome. Franklin Okafor and his wife Grace, a colleague named Amma, who grew up in Accra and makes groundnut stew that tastes like something I can't name but that my body recognizes. And Deja Nwosu, who was home from Brenton for the holidays and who sat at the corner of the table and ate 2 full plates and talked about her microeconomics professor with the particular intensity of someone in love with learning. The wine was a $12 bottle from the shop on 4th Street. The plates were 3 different patterns. I've been collecting them from thrift stores, a habit that started as poverty and became preference. The conversation moved fast and doubled back on itself, and at one point Grace Okafor said something about her mother that made everyone at the table go quiet in recognition before dissolving into laughter. At one point I looked around that table. I thought about the table on Carver Street in Pembroke Falls, the good dishes that came out at Thanksgiving, the soup that smelled like cardamom, the way the room reorganized itself and where I stood in it. I did not explain the comparison to anyone at the table. I didn't need to. What I know is this. I was seen. By every person in that room, I was entirely, specifically, without condition seen. Not for what I had accomplished. for who I was when I wasn't accomplishing anything. That is the thing about a chosen table. It doesn't require you to earn your seat, you just sit down. And the people there say, "You belong here," and they mean it. If you're still listening, I want to say something directly to you. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you found yourself nodding at something specific, at a dinner table or a voicemail or a particular silence, then you already know the pattern I am describing. There is a set of words they use. You know them. You have probably heard them more than once, applied to you in the voice of someone who loves you in a way that costs you something. They call it being difficult. They call it being sensitive. They call it making everything about yourself. They say you always had to be different. They say you are too independent in a tone that means you have made their absence inconvenient. I want you to hear me when I say this. Those words are not a description of who you are. They are the sound of someone losing control of a story they never had the right to tell. The story of who you are belongs to you. And here is what I know to be true: the version of yourself that was built in the absence of the support you deserved. That version is not lesser. That version is not the consolation prize. The people who grow up having to verify everything themselves, who file the FAFSA in a school library on Tuesday evenings, who walk across a stage with one person in the audience, who move to a city with $1.40 and a suitcase with a broken zipper. Those people do not arrive at success despite what happened to them. They arrive carrying everything they learned on the way. You are not behind. You are precisely where the long route was always taking you. Here is the question I have been sitting with, and I want to ask it to you directly. If your family called you tomorrow, after months of silence, after the birthday party they chose instead of your graduation, after the voicemails that asked for everything except the right thing, what do you think they would say first? Help me, or I'm sorry? Drop your answer in the comments. Just those 2 words if you want. I read every single one, and I mean that. And if this story meant something to you, if it said something you've been trying to say for a long time, there are more of them here, more tables, more long routes, more people who built something real from something that was supposed to hold them in place. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.